what's going on, everybody? RogersBase here with my review of One Punch Man anime episode 6, The Terrifying City. And I have to say, as somebody who is only an anime-only watcher and who is not yet caught up in the manga, this was a really exciting chapter for me because all of these characters that you guys have been teasing to me in the comments and tweeting me about and saying, look forward to this character coming into the story, we finally saw those characters for the first time. This was a much needed setup episode for the Heroes Association. And again, last week's episode I thought was like almost 5 out of 5. It was a wonderful episode. The fight with Saitama and Genos and then like the training regiment and all that stuff. It was awesome. And this episode, I think, while it didn't reach that peak, was again exciting because of all these new characters. We got the introduction of Tornado. We got the introduction of Blizzard very briefly. We got the introduction of all these other A-class heroes. We had like Golden Ball and Spring Mustache and even like the dude in the dog suit who's apparently like an A-class or an S-class. There's all these characters who were introduced, and one in particular, excuse me, I have a weird cough today. One in particular, who was actually mentioned near the beginning of this episode, King, who was the author of the book that Saitama was reading. And I recognized the name as soon as he said King. I was like, yo, that's one of the S-Class heroes. I remember hearing about that guy. Some of you guys have been tweeting me about it. So I really want to know what that guy's deal is or what his powers are. I really don't know. Again, I don't read the manga. I'm only watching the anime. And I'm excited to see that character finally introduced into the story. But I think of all the heroes that were first introduced for the first time in this week's episode, the one I am most excited to see in action is Tornado. And we would have probably seen Tornado in action had the rest of the people in the Heroes Association allowed her to go fight that seaweed monster. And she was like, I could take it. But even they were like, no, listen, this thing was too powerful. You would even have trouble with this. But Tornado seems awesome. Like with her telekinetic powers where she's shuffling stuff around and floating through the air. I mean, she's like Mewtwo. She's Mewtwo. Mewtwo in like a cute girl's form. I am super excited to find out more about that character. Hopefully there's going to be a really cool fight with her coming up soon. I doubt Saitama is going to fight her because obviously he's one of the good guys. But hopefully we see one of like the villains of the week or whatever fighting Tornado. That's going to be pretty exciting. Now, with that being said, I still thought there were some awesome action sequences in this episode. The two highlights, obviously, being the fight with the seaweed monster between Spring Mustache, the seaweed monster, Golden Ball, and then finally Saitama, and the fight near the beginning of this episode with Speed of Sonic and Saitama, the rematch between the two of them, if you even want to call it a rematch. We see Sonic, chasing after Saitama, and Saitama having just been told by Genos that he has to actually look out for trouble, otherwise he's going to get his rank removed and he'll be kicked out of the Heroes Association. So, he's looking around the city trying to find trouble and trying to find somebody to take down, and then Sonic appears out of nowhere and he's like, hey, it's time for me to fight you. And he's like, dude, you're my buddy, I don't have time for this. You're my rival, I don't have time for this. And then out of nowhere, this other dude comes up, like Tank Top Tiger, I think that was his name, I don't even remember, he was a scrub. He comes up and he's like, oh, I'm going to stop you, Saitama. You've been walking through the city acting weird. And then just as he's about to do something to him, Sonic goes in, throws the shuriken over at Tiger, and then we have this awesome sequence where Sonic is throwing all these shurikens. It's like the Fury of Carnage or whatever his attack name was called. It's flying through the city, attacking all the buildings. And then Saitama, just after he's like, all right, I have had enough of this, teleports behind Sonic and just slaps him into the ground. Doesn't even punch him, just slaps him into the ground. And I think that goes to show that Saitama somewhat cares for Sonic. He sees him as his rival and his friend. He's obviously not his rival in terms of power. Saitama's like so much stronger than every other character in this series. But I think just in terms of like the way they think, it's cool to see that he kind of somewhat respects Sonic, but he knows like, listen, I don't have time for this. Smacks him down to the ground. Sonic one-shots, lands into the ground, and the Heroes Association takes note of it. I thought that was kind of cool. And one other thing that I really want to point out between the Sonic and Saitama stuff, the animation. Once again, fluid animation, looked beautiful, didn't even have a dropped frame throughout the course of that little rematch. I thought that looked absolutely phenomenal. And again, that goes to Madhouse's credit. Madhouse has been doing a fantastic job with the anime adaptation of One Punch Man. It is way better than I think a lot of people anticipated, even fans of the One Punch Man manga originally. And it's good enough to the point where people like me, who never even heard of the series before starting the anime, had to be told by you guys even to start the series. I love it now. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And I think had I gone into the manga, well, that's not true. I think had I read the manga first, I probably still would like the series, but I feel like the anime has set it up in such a way that people who are more like casual anime watchers or people who, just kind of like anime, kind of like manga are really, really going to get into it because it doesn't take itself seriously. There's so many moments in this episode that had great comedy, and it just goes to show that, One Punch Man is an awesome parody series. Even though it's, a solid action anime series, it also kind of parodies anime and slice of life stuff, particularly the scene after Saitama takes down the seaweed monster and then he's cooking like the seaweed stew, and then Genos talks to him about like, oh, I know that you're cooking seaweed soup, but there's actually no scientific study saying that seaweed is going to make you grow hair again. And then Saitama's like, I didn't say anything about hair. What do you like? That moment was great. I loved it. And again, even the comedy right before Saitama takes down the seaweed monster, we don't even see him punch her. He just is like, oh man, I forgot stock for the soup. And then immediately what's going to happen because she's this seaweed thing. He's going to use her seaweed hair for the soup. I thought it was awesome. And those kind of comedy bits are the things that are going to get mainstream people into the show. And I think for anybody out there who is a casual anime watcher or just a fan of anime in general, if you're looking to get your friends into a series, I would highly, highly suggest One Punch Man. I really would because, obviously you guys know this. I love One Piece. This channel of mine is almost entirely One Piece. I go over One Piece reviews almost every single week. And One Piece is a massive series. That's a 700 episode, 800 chapter series. It's massive. You can't really get someone into that unless they're, willing to have a huge time investment and sit down and get into it. Whereas, One Punch Man, we're only 6 episodes in, and already a ton of stuff has happened. We had Saitama's little growth arc. We had the introduction to the Heroes Association. We had all these other characters being introduced. Sonic got introduced. Genos got introduced. The Mosquito Girl fight. A lot of stuff has already happened within the course of 6 episodes, and these episodes go quick. And also, one other thing I want to note about this one in particular, this episode seemed a little shorter than usual, and I think that's probably because there was a pretty hefty section at the ending after the credits already rolled. And I know they've been doing that pretty frequently, having scenes at the end that aren't technically the ending scene of the show. They happen after the credits, and they're kind of like essential to the story. Last week's episode was the one where, Genos finally moved in with Saitama, and Saitama's like, you can't move here, and then Genos is like, I got money. He's like, all right, bro, where's your toothbrush? And that was important to the beginning of this episode because now we see those two are living together. So, you have to watch those ending sequences after the credits. But back to what I was saying about getting casual people into the show. They're short episodes, they're quick, and I think people who are at least willing to sit down and watch 1 or 2 episodes will take the time and will enjoy this show. It's got pretty much something for everybody. It's funny, it's got great action, and this episode, again, solidified that. Like, there really wasn't a downbeat. Like, again, not a lot happened, so I can't give it that high of a review score, but the animation was solid, the music was great, we got introduced to all these new characters, Tornado, Blizzard, King, the dog dude, I don't even know if he's an S-class or an A-class, the dude who was on top of the monsters. There's all these other new characters that are being introduced that I'm excited about, and are just getting me excited to watch next week's episode. I mean, every single week I wait on Sunday morning to turn on my computer first thing after I wake up and watch One Punch Man. It's now sort of been a routine of mine, and I think that's because the show is so exciting. And again, as somebody who only watches the anime and doesn't watch the manga, having all these characters introduced and, really like having this great pacing, being introduced to these new characters, having the comedy, having the action, all sort of like wrapped into one little neat package is great. And it's something that, again, I look forward to every single week. I have a couple other things written down about this episode that I want to talk about. In particular, Spring Mustache and Golden Ball, and the little moment right before they're about to attack the seaweed monster. And then Genos was like, oh, the proximity thing's going off. So I'm assuming that's how Genos is sort of like clearing out the city, like helping people. Because he mentions at the beginning of this episode to Saitama that unless you are actually helping people, like actively helping people at least once a week, you're going to get your rank stripped from you. So I think Genos' way of actually doing that is he set these proximity things all across the city, so he sees that if there's ever trouble, he'll go and he'll take care of it. But as he saw in this episode, he thinks there's going to be trouble. Spring Mustache and Golden Ball were already there, and he's like, all right, I'll let them take care of it, and he starts scrubbing the toilet. I thought that was really, really funny. But in particular, I do want to mention the Spring Mustache sequence. In particular, first off, Golden Ball, whatever, he was a scrub, he shot the little thing, and then the seaweed monster smacked it away. But Spring Mustache, for, as whatever as he was, he's an A-class hero. He obviously fell to the seaweed monster that Saitama one-shotted, but I thought the sequence with him where he was curling up his sword and then shot it out into the sky, that looked awesome. The animation on that was beautiful, like seeing the sword curl up. And in particular, I'm comparing this to the only thing I really have to compare this to, Diamante's fight that just happened in One Piece. Diamante, for those of you guys who don't know, is a like ripple fruit user. I think that's his devil fruit's name, where basically he could turn things like into flags or like change their density. Anyway, it's irrelevant to this, but it has a point with the Spring Mustache stuff. Is Diamante, one of his powers, he could like wrap up his sword and then shoot it out, very similar to what Spring Mustache did in this episode. And it looked like garbage in the last One Piece episode. It looked really, really bad. So to see that kind of power translated into an anime with a much higher budget and that looks way better, I gotta say, props again to Madhouse. And, I said a much higher budget. Really isn't that much higher of a budget. One Piece is a massive franchise, gets a lot of money for each episode. And one of the directors from Madhouse recently even tweeted out that One Punch Man doesn't have a bigger budget than any other show. It has about the same amount of budget that any of the other Madhouse shows do. But that the people who work on One Punch Man are so passionate about it that they actually take the time to make every frame of animation look beautiful. And again, props to every animator who works on the show. Everybody who's working on the show in general. There's not been a bad episode yet. I don't think there will be a bad episode, to be honest. There's only, I think, 12 or 13 episodes this season. So at this rate, I think we're good to go for a just super solid show all the way down the line. But guys, let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. I'm going to give this week's episode a 4 out of 5. Really exciting with the introduction of the new heroes. I really like the fight sequence between Saitama and Sonic, for as brief as it was, and I like the little bit with him versus the seaweed monster. Like this video if you liked anything I had to say. Also, I know it's going to happen in the comments. It happens every single week. People are like, what's with the dislikes? What's with the dislikes? It's dislike bots. It happens on every single one of my anime reviews. Don't worry about it. It's nothing bad. And I think one of the interesting things, and I think I'll just take the opportunity to talk about it right now, one of the interesting things about those dislike bots on the like and dislike bar is that before, people would dislike bot videos because they wanted you to be lower in the search ranking. But now, because of the way that YouTube works, dislikes actually work just as well as likes do. They both count as rankings to actually move you up in the search engine. So if someone has 2 dislikes and 2 likes, that video is still going to count as 4 likes on the video. So I don't really get what the point of dislike botting is or whatever, so thanks to whoever's doing it every single week. I don't particularly care. And again, it only happens on my anime reviews. This has happened for One Punch Man, and this has happened for One Piece. Yet the manga review chapters and all the other stuff just has like a regular amount of dislikes, like 2 or 3 or whatever. So curious about that. I don't know who's doing it. I don't particularly care. But if you guys want to like it to counterbalance, go right ahead. More likes for me is great because then it pushes me higher up on the search engine ranking. And I also want to take this opportunity to say thank you for everybody who has been supporting my One Punch Man content. This stuff has been blowing up. I was even retweeted by Daisuke, who is the official distributor of One Punch Man over here in North America. So super exciting that I'm being seen as this One Punch Man reviewer. It's all because of you guys. Seriously, your support means everything. Thank you so much. Also, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my next One Punch Man review. Next week's episode seems pretty exciting. I don't think we're going to get more of Blizzard because they sort of had that as a little bit of a joke near the end of the promo where Blizzard was like, you'll see more of me and the Blizzard bunch next episode. And they're like, actually, we're not scheduled for next week's episode. So I'm excited for whatever happens next week. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.